This attack was stressful and frustrating for those who was managed to defense and recovery process. But on the other hand, it was also helped us to raise awareness about the importance of strengthening cyber resilience system both at the highest level and among the public and the media, of course.
Welcome to the Digital Government Podcast. Tune in to discover the future of governance and ways of getting there.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Digital Government Podcast with your usual host, Federico Plantera, journalist, sociologist, and researcher, today addressing a topic that belongs to the realm of cybersecurity, cyber safety, cyber threats. Because as cyber threats become more complex and persistent, then it is obvious that governments around the world are kind of being pushed or forced to confront this reality, that it's not enough to just have a strategy on paper, but actually effective cybersecurity requires more. What that more entails, we're going to explore today with two guests from Montenegro. The first is Dusan Polovic, Director General for Infrastructure, Information Security, Digitalization and E-Services at the Ministry of Public Administration of Montenegro. Welcome, Dusan.
Thank you.
And following this long title, then there is our second guest of the day, who is Milan Sekulowski, Senior Cybersecurity Expert at E-Governance Academy. Milan, welcome to you as well.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So let's get right into that. We have a lot of things to address, and I will actually say also, just as a note for everybody to know, we're talking about this and about cybersecurity in Montenegro also because Montenegro, and specifically the Ministry of Public Administration, is also E-Governance Academy's Partner of the Year for 2025, as we saw during this year's e-governance conference. So Dusan, getting right into that, I would start from giving a little bit the institutional and political picture, let's say, that supports the work that has been done in terms of cybersecurity. What do I mean by that? There has been a groundwork that has basically led the country to have a long-term readiness and preparedness in terms of cybersecurity. It became with a policy vision, but then there was more. There was an institutional work, there was political commitment, there were also external partnerships. So starting from here, what are the institutional and political factors that enabled Montenegro basically to prioritize cybersecurity as this state-level concern? Was it in the first place a matter of threats, or this idea and this vision was there even next to that?
Yes, you attacked the very important point. You must have a strategic vision, then you need to have a political support. That is support from the highest level of government. In addition, it is necessary also to comply with international norms, to standards in the field of cybersecurity, to have especially important for us as candidate states for EU membership. Montenegro is as you know, a front runner in this process in the Western Balkan. And in that sense, we also want to be a part of a successful European community that respects the highest democratic principles. Accordingly, it was necessary first to amend the legislation in the area and harmonize it with EU directives like NIS2 directives in this field. So today, Montenegro is the first country in the Western Balkan which harmonize law of information security with the NIS directive. So I will remind you of the fact that we were the victim of the complex, massive cyber attack on government infrastructure, government network, that paralyzed the provision of the digital services in Montenegro for a period of few months.
When did this happen, for everybody to remember?
It was happening in August 2022. So we received the huge and complex attack. It was first time in Montenegro that we are facing with so complex attacks. Of course, we were receiving different kind of attack in the past, especially in some period when we have some political or geopolitical processes in our area. So despite the painful recovery process, we have had concluded how important is to have a well-organized legislative first, but also internal capacities in the national institution to respond to their challenges. And above, high-quality international cooperation. You mentioned that. Also, this attack was stressful and frustrating for those who was managed to defense and recovery process. But on the other hand, it was also helped us to raise awareness about the importance of strengthening cyber resilience system, both at the highest level and among the public and the media, of course. From today's perspective, I would say that we turn problems into advantage, that we use public attention in this period to achieve numerous goals through the support we receive at this moment from European Union, also bilaterally from our friends and partners from the alliance, from the NATO as the US and the UK, and to strengthen our cybersecurity system in very short time, I would say. Finally, I would like to back again to highlight the role of the Minister of the Public Administration in this period, Maras Dukaj, who recognized the importance of this process at that moment, and his leadership, which is so important because you need to have a leadership strong on high level in government, and of course political support, which is not so easy to have.
I will make a little connection with also last year's Partner of the Year, actually, from the e-Governance Academy and the e-Governance Conference, because I think it's interesting and actually even more focuses a lens, let's say, on the Western and Eastern Balkans. The fact that also last year, the Partner of the Year was the government of Moldova, and the main domain that we had addressed with them was exactly like cybersecurity, at a time of political processes happening, such as elections. And I think in their case, they had also like an upcoming presidential election, if I'm not wrong. Milan, from your position of working with the Governance Academy, and also like seeing in the first place, let's say, what was the state of the art in Montenegro in terms of preparedness or like cybersecurity, how would you assess, let's say, that Montenegro's starting point was in terms of things that were already there, things that maybe had to be smoothened, or like edges that had to be made more coherent, let's say, with being able to face increasing cyber threats?
So, yeah, I mean, from the perspective of somebody who works with governmental and public institutions and help them in mature their cybersecurity posture, I can give you a bit of an overview. And it's not really a static point in time where things started. It's more of a dynamic story and how it evolved and how it developed. I had my first engagements on cybersecurity with Montenegro around 2015-16. This was before I joined the EGA. And at the time, actually, Montenegro was the first one in the region who had a cybersecurity legislation in place. There was a cybersecurity strategy in place. They were the only one with national cert. They even had a high-level political body, high-level strategic decision-making body, Information Security Council. So you had all these elements who were there, who were thought through before anybody else in the region, for that matter. But these elements liked practicing. And partly it was because the digitalization of society and economy did not seem to evolve in connection to those. There was no direct connection in evolving digitalization of economy and society with these cybersecurity governance structures in place. So the lacking element was practice of governing cybersecurity, practice of being prepared for what we know now is inevitable event when you are under a big cyber attack. That has been recognized then, and the government started undertaking some structural reforms. But then in the middle of that work, the COVID pandemic hit, and with it, the huge increase in digitalization of every aspect of society. That was, as we all know, a huge boost for the digitalization. Montenegro also had political challenges, but this kind of created the perfect storm, which I believe led to the 2022 attack and to its consequences. So it's not like there was nothing before. It was just that there were elements, but they were not put into practice, so they could not effectively, at the time, prevent what happened. But as Dusan also pointed out, this attack was really a wake-up call for the government, and very quickly, in an effort which shows a lot of domestic ingenuity and a lot of make do and let's do attitudes, they have managed to deal with the consequences of that attack. And since then, and this is what I now observe as employee of e-governance academy and as somebody who works on two EU-funded projects currently active with this country in the region, we see that since then the government has really stepped up the efforts to invest much more in increasing in cybersecurity posture. Now, again, Dusan gave us the insights from how it looked from the government perspective. So I will not reflect further on that, but I can reflect from the aspect of external partners and those who support those developments and that capacity building. After that attack, the decision of the government made it possible to also for Montenegro to receive much more support from the outside. So as a result, there were three big EU-funded projects since August 2022. One has finished, two are still active. But having an opportunity to benefit from international support is one element, but you also have to have the internal capacity to absorb that support. And this is something where you can see how much a government does or does not invest in its structures and in its people. So we have seen progress, significant progress, as Dusan noted. The 2024 law, which is now aligned with the NIS2 directive, is put there in place. The new cybersecurity agency is yet to be formed. We were also very proud through EU-funded projects that EGA through Rapid Assistance Project and the Cyber Balkans Project, we have helped with establishment of the Governmental Security Operations Center, the GovSoc, further strengthened and helped them formalize the Governmental Incident Response Team, in addition to the national, which still exists there. So these are some really, really positive developments. And what we see as a key challenge now is how do you sustain this development and how do you build further on this?
Okay. The question on how do you sustain this development, I think, moves the conversation also a bit more on a timeline-related, let's say, type of dimension. So something that is more about also like looking towards the future and not just what has happened now, but following exactly this input. Then, also for the sake of our audience, allow me to try to reconstruct the timeline of how we got to here. So the cyber attack that Dusan, you mentioned, was in 2022. And Milan, the pandemic that you mentioned that instead had halted the development and the rollout of these projects happened basically right before then, so between 2020 and 2022. But this means that then the development of Montenegro's cybersecurity started way before the attack of 2022, because Dusan, as you mentioned, it was not the first, but it was the most disruptive. And started also even before the pandemic, which is the moment when many people like started thinking about digital tools as a way to do better certain things. Dusan, before the pandemic, yes?
Well, generally speaking, we start to create this reform in cybersecurity, which Milan mentioned. At the end of 2019, I think so, mid 2019, after the corona pandemic, we start to create the new reform. But as Milan said, it then comes some political changes in Montenegro. So we change a few different government in a period of two years. And this changing administration also result with the slow reform in the cybersecurity. And then came the 2022 with the cyber attack, and the government wasn't prepared for this kind of attack in this period. Milan mentioned that we start on time and that we've been, let's say, in the Western Balkan front runner in strategic level with the first strategy of cyber security. Then we've been also first state with the national CERT establishment, but the role of national CERT or type was most for the education, for the awareness. So this national CERT doesn't have capacities like we have right now for operation. And when we face with the operation, with the real attack, then they do not have enough capacities to manage these situations. So I started in MPA with my work in the June 2022, and the attack was in August 2022.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I could say that I do not have lucky, and it was strange, because you need to it was necessary to manage an attack, to also change the regulation, and to mitigate and to have a response and the other things. So it was, let's say, crazy time. Yeah, as I said, we took this attack as an advantage, and we have in this period much better awareness in the higher level, and we use, let's say, as an opportunity this attack, because we start with the forming immediately the separate direction for the government CERT. We start with employing people. We much more have resources, funding for the new ecosystem of cybersecurity tools. We receive a lot of support from European Commission through several projects like Rapid Response, like Cyber Balkans. We receive also support and collaboration from the US, especially US teams, also with the UK team. And we, through this support, we also establish adequate space with the security tools for these teams. So we start to have also much better international cooperation to share information with the Belgian CERT on an example. And let's say that there was several different reasons why we improve our capacity and strengthen our capacity. So in the meantime, we take some experience also in this area with concrete things in attack. And in the period after the cyber attack, we still are receiving a lot of continuously different type of cyber attacks, type of intrusion, some different malicious activities, but we succeed to manage all of this because we have human resources, we have tools, we have equipment, we have, let's say, experience, and meanwhile, also through this support of European Commission, we established this government SOC center for the operation. So we have on 24/7 monitoring the all information systems and all infrastructure in the Ministry of Public Administration. So let's say there is several reasons. Also, we have much more funding, as I already said. We increase the salaries for the employment in the cybersecurity institutions in Montenegro.
I remember actually the topic of salaries. I'm glad that you introduced it, not just because everybody loves about not just because we like to talk about salaries, but because I remember when I was working already on some other previous contents regarding the projects in Montenegro from the Governance Academy side. I remember that was mentioned, and not just in Montenegro, but in Western Balkans in general, as an element that is related to human capital, the people who work in the ministries and in the public administration, and as a consequence that are beyond technology, the first line of defense, let's say, and that also then at that point, a lack of motivation or a compensation or gratification, however we want to call it, for these people who are the first, let's say, line of response and line of defense in the public sector, could either drive some talent out, for example, towards the private sector and away from these government organizations, or in any case, just like stifle a bit of this motivation that is needed instead. The question, and the reason why I'm connecting it then to a topic of human capital, Milan, is what then has changed, let's say, through the increased awareness, through the trainings, through the changes that have happened at the institutional level, and also the international collaboration, the international support. We heard the names of many countries, the names of many organizations. So from your point of view, if you were to just take a snapshot at the moment, what has changed for the better?
Well, what has changed? Let's speak about what has changed. Some for the better, some for, I wouldn't say worse, but definitely more complex. So the environment in which the capacity building of cybersecurity institutions in Montenegro and elsewhere in the region and other places is happening is way more complex than it ever was. Since the COVID pandemic, our dependence on the internet-enabled services and digitalization has only grown. We have new technologies coming up rapidly, like the AI, and they're being adopted rapidly. And this is all changing and making the landscape even more complicated. In case of Montenegro, Montenegro is a country who is in the process of joining the EU. So the accession process also means managing a lot of change, undergoing a lot of transformation, not least in the area of administration and human capital. So when we speak about cybersecurity capacity, we often refer to the PPT, the people process technologies. And from my experience with EGA and before, I would say that definitely people are the most important element in building this capacity, in making sure that once reached capacity is actually sustained, because it can go back. We have seen evidence of those things going back. But again, this is challenging. As you've mentioned, competing with the private sector in attracting talent, it cannot be done based on the salary. However, you increase it, and we have those examples in some other countries in the region where the salaries have been increased, but then, the private sector just raises the benchmark once more. So you cannot compete on the salaries, but you can compete on maybe in the area of good HR policies. So if you have some good and a bit more innovative policies in and practices in recruiting cadre, in trying to attract. So maybe you don't have the resources to attract already formed and experienced cybersecurity expert, but you can start with maybe somebody younger, somebody who's keen on learning, somebody who would prioritize the type of work and the type of information that you can only get in a government, in a public sector environment over the salary, at least for a couple of years. A really strong element now. I mean, all these institutional developments, political developments, of course, they create the environment. They're really important. But the most important thing at this moment in Montenegrin increased cybersecurity capacity are the people and the young people, which the government has found ways of involving in their teams, involving in the institutions. We have provided some support in their training, but again, the backbone of that is with the government and with the human resource management practices there. So this is how hopefully we can also make all these policies which are being made. So the other P and the technologies which are being procured by the Montenegrin government, by different partners. Hopefully we can make them work together for the benefit of the cyber resilience of Montenegro. And again, we should take into consideration whether we're praising or criticizing that all these HR policies and all these recruitment and training and retention challenges are also happening in a very dynamic environment. Public administration reform is something which is still very much ongoing in all countries in the region to adapt overall to the challenges of the modern society, challenges of modernization, new integration. And this is it. But there are also external factors like the business environment, where the business environment and businesses, even some small entrepreneurs, and there are again good examples in Montenegro, they can offer valuable partnerships to the government in increasing the overall societal economical resilience to cyber threats. but also, some disturbances also in a business sector can be seen as a chance for the public sector. So just these days, last days around the conference, we had a meeting with one of the ministers from the region, where he actually mentioned the fact that there were massive layoffs in the IT industry, which was global, and of course it was affected also it was felt in the region as well. He actually said that they, in the government of that country, saw this as a chance to, yes, let's get them now. When they've lost the job there, but they are still good, they have the skills and knowledge that can be used in the government, so let's try to get them now. So this kind of out-of-the-box thinking and working is what can make Montenegro and the others even more resilient and even more ready.
And you've mentioned the public sector reform. You said that it's been happening in general, like not just in Montenegro, but in other countries in the area. And I think it's something like important to note, like in order to be more, let's use a buzzword, future ready, let's say, or in any case, at least ready to implement in a good way, let's say, more and more technology, that especially with artificial intelligence that we have mentioned before, looms there on the horizon, let's say. And we need to know how to implement it well. And that's actually some kind of reform or or project or government initiative that, for example, I don't really see happening in other countries that are not in that area. So I think that this is like a point of pride, let's say, even more for the fact that there is this understanding over there. And considering that you have mentioned, Milan, young people and also like an investment in human capital, I think this all hints at also something that you have mentioned before, which was the topic of sustainability of these efforts and what has been done so far. We are heading towards the end of this episode, so I will ask one question more to each of you. And Dusan, piggybacking exactly this point of the sustainability. Looking ahead, what are some things that make you confident and some things that instead you think need to be addressed further, let's say, in order to maintain what Montenegro has achieved up until now in cybersecurity?
I will back here on the question which Milan emphasized about this necessity and importance of these internal capacities, but not in, let's say, capacities with the equipment, with the tools, only on the people. I think the people are most important. It is not so easy to build one cyber security expert in the government. There needs at least 5 years to build one expert in cyber capacity, especially in government. And the main issue is to keep this cybersecurity expert in the government. Most important thing for my point of view is people. So we succeed in one thing which is so important, to have to have a team, to have a good team with the different levels, different layers. And right now you need to expand this team and to specialize the members of team for each, let's say, each part of cyber security, because there is so much different roles in cyber security, and you need to cover all this role. That is one of the biggest issue. And the second one is to keep this awareness and this position and understanding of the cybersecurity resilience on the high level. Because right now we start to speak more about the AI, of course, and there is a place for AI, and a very important place in the cybersecurity, because you can cover some issue which you have with the internal capacity with some people using some AI solution. But of course, you need to have also expertise to use this solution. So let's say, from my point of view, it is most important to keep the team on place and to keep focus in the high level about the importance of the cyber security, and of course to work more with the financing and make your team more resilient.
I understand, but I would say, and then this is like a point that is more that is very domestic. I would say, like in terms of like talent retention, but also raising this talent. That's why we're talking exactly about the future outlook in that sense. Milan, last thing from you instead. If we were to have a more like a less domestic but more outward kind of look, let's say, to get back to the topic of support that we have mentioned all the way up to now. Speaking from an angle that is a bit more on international cooperation, what are some takeaways or some lessons that also just from your own point of view, you think Montenegro's experience shows, even just for other countries in the region, for example?
Actually, I mean, I can continue. Fully agree with what Dusan said in terms of priorities in how to build more resilient future. And I would actually add your question and that component in that context also, because it will always be challenging to keep good people, and the environment will be ever more complex and complicated, and it will be even more difficult for any ministry or government organization to deal with all the problems themselves. So they have to engage in partnerships. I've hinted already earlier, but these cross-sectorial partnerships on the national level are crucial for ensuring the whole of society approach to cyber resilience and effective, and to give us a chance to be future ready at all. But it's of course even more complicated because cyber is by default not national, it's international. So the regional cooperation as the first step, because all the infrastructures, speaking about Western Balkans, are very much interconnected in many ways, not just digitally, but culturally, economically, in any other way, they are interconnected. So this is irreplaceable element of any government's capacity. And also we are all part of Europe. Politically, geographically, one way or another, economically, definitely, we are all part of the same space. And in that sense, I believe it's really important to continue with this kind of international project support, because all the three projects that we've mentioned earlier that were supporting Montenegro were in effect regional. So the Rapid Assistance 1 and 2 were covering 3 out of 6 countries in the region, while Cyber Balkans project covers all 6 Western Balkan economies. So this is not accidental. What we will continue to do, of course, help support building the national regulatory legal frameworks, building awareness of the highest political levels, but also wider societies and even some specific elements of society. We will continue supporting the legal reforms, but I believe that this element of international cooperation is something that this kind of projects bring a lot of value. And this is something that we will also put an emphasis on. And there we are focusing on 2 things. One is on exchanging good practices and knowledge. And to that end, actually, at the EJ conference, we have launched something very interesting, which is the No Cyber website. So no like knowing with a K.
I thought like no cyber. Website.
No cyber. So no cyber threats happen. Yes. So nocyber.eu is the portal where we will actually promote some of the lessons learned and some of the good practices coming from this region, from the Western Balkans. So you may read there something also about some of the good stuff that was done among other places in Montenegro as well. But also we are working in parallel on helping establish platforms for information exchange and collaboration, and most importantly, trust building among the key cybersecurity stakeholders in the region, because it's these trusted networks and connections which make us all more resilient to the bad guys and girls and more future ready.
And if I may, one point more, if we were to create some ideal model, an example for next 5 years, and if we were persistent that we only stick to this model, I think we will be wrong. What would be a model today, it wouldn't be a best model for tomorrow. The dynamics of technological changes, of political changes, social changes are so intense, and these models must be continuously modified. It is the ability to quickly change the model, and it's quick adaptation to the changes that is crucial. And flexibility and adaptability, that is the model from my point of view for the cybersecurity in future.
And that gives us also more confidence, exactly, about the sustainability that we were talking about and the effectiveness. The effectiveness must be part of the sustainability, of course, and not just the funding and the support. You heard today from Dusan Polovic, Director General at the Ministry of Public Administration of Montenegro. Thank you for joining us. And Milan Sekulowski, Senior Cybersecurity Expert at eGovernance Academy. Thanks a lot to you too. Thank you to everybody in the audience who tuned into this episode of the Digital Government Podcast. That's it also from your usual host, Federico, and see you at the next one.
This podcast is brought to you by the eGovernance Academy. Tune in next time.